Good evening and a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us for our today's sixth masterclass. My name is Professor Smita Chaudhary and I am the head of the Department of Human Resources at Thames School of Business, and I will be the moderator of today's masterclass. Now, for all of you who are attending the masterclass for the first time, I would like to just reiterate that masterclass is the online webinar series which is being hosted by Plain University's School of Business on a weekly basis. This masterclass is being conducted by the faculty of the Plain School of Business in the area of their expertise and on topics which are relevant to the corporates. Now, the topic for today is building a data-driven HR function. In this masterclass, we are going to talk about what organizations can do in their HR function to make the data is generated in the HR department on employees more data oriented. Now, this is very important because if it is done properly, then it will make the organization more well-equipped to handle their HR analytics more optimally. And it's also very relevant in today's world because as we are seeing all around us, environmental constraints of all kinds from customers and from the suppliers and from the governments and from the trades end, it's putting pressure on the organization to rethink their HR strategy and operations in order to save costs, improve productivity, and enhance engagement of the employees. Given this scenario, data-driven HR can go a long way towards these objectives. So this masterclass is being conducted by Professor Neeraj Mankad and Professor Tejpal Batra. Professor Neeraj Mankad is the assistant dean of programs and a faculty in strategy and operations at Thames University. As assistant dean, he is responsible for implementing and maintaining quality of the university's multiple offerings across all the schools. He has been training executives and consulting in areas of strategy and analytics. He has started executive programs in strategy for a leading automotive leadership and an advisor on strategy to several startups. He is also on the board of the National HRD Network Structure. Professor Mankad is a PhD from IIT Bombay and he is an MD of the United Kingdom. He is also a bachelor's engineer. Coming to Professor Tejpal Batra, of the National HRD Networks Pune chapter. Professor Mankad, coming to Professor Mankad, 20 years of global experience in transformation, operations, information technology, and human resources with organizations like AP Moller, Maersk, P&O, Deloitte, and Cognizant. He has extensive experience in top management, understanding business, and recommending and implementing solutions in business to transform in line with set business goals. He is founder of SSO Consultants and co-founder of Ideal Child Foundation. His passion for teaching takes him to various top schools as visiting faculty, including FAME. He is an MBA in Human Resources and he is trained in Princeton and ITIL. Now, without further ado, I would request Professor Mankad and Professor Batra to start the masterclass session.
Thank you, Smita, for that great background to the session, and it's nice to have it from somebody who's from the HR, has understood the function, and has also been very supportive of the way we take the analytics aspect here. So thank you once again, Smita ma'am, for the short introduction here. A very warm welcome to all the attendees who have joined in today to listen to Tejpal and myself. Before I begin, we'll just go through the formalities. I think the Q&A box is open, so we'll take your questions once. If there is anything, please type it in the Q&A box. There is no chat enabled here. So let's, just to begin. Smita mentioned some important aspects about how organizations need to look at, data and about analytics and so on. And the reason we, Tejpal and myself, realized that there is a requirement to talk about, as you can see, the topic building a data-driven HR function. Because there's a great focus, as all of you from the HR domain would uh, obviously be getting on the analytics aspect, that HR analytics, trying to look at predictive and prescriptive and so on and so forth, and big data and all of that, looking at all these aspects of analytics. But what we realized, and that's based on our experiences with various companies and trainings that we've been doing, is that there is a part before analytics which is normally missed out or not given that much of attention to, if I may. And that's the focus on creating a data-driven HR function. And therefore, we thought just to bring you to a very small kind of an introduction to the topic of building an HR-driven function. So between Tejpal and me, we've been working together for quite some time now in the analytics function. Tejpal, thank you for agreeing to join in this flame webinar with me to talk about our experiences.
Always a pleasure, Neeraj.
And so let me really start off by trying to figure out why do we need a data-driven culture, essentially. Why is data critical? And the point we would like to make here is that before you embark on your analytical journey, either as an individual in the HR department or as a leader of the HR function, what is important for you to understand is about the data that you want to look at, and do you have the kind of culture within the organization. And that's why we thought we will look at this topic. Why do you need a data-driven culture? Now, obviously, Tejpal and myself, we've gone into a lot of organizations and understood and tried to figure out, observe, got some insights into this. But what's happening across the globe is, and many of you would have heard this, it's a very cliche statement that, data is the new oil and data is the new water, and, wars will be fought on data and so on and so forth. Generically, I'm not just talking specific to HR. And data-driven decisions are required to be more innovative. So, you can take a look at some of the numbers that I'm not going to talk too much in details here, because I'm sure many of you would have, gone through and taken a look here. But just a couple of highlights that we could make is that there could have been an additional 65 million net income had companies, focused a little more on accessing data there. And similarly, if you look at the business of data, that's growing around 30% annually. And these are, our compilations from researches by MIT Digital Economy Center and Forbes and so on and so forth. So I think this is the broad overview of why data is becoming extremely critical, and not that we didn't know it, but this makes it even more in emphasis. I think Tejpal, would you like to give some insights from your consulting and work with companies?
Yeah. Thanks, Neeraj. Thanks, Smita ma'am, for a lovely introduction. Humbled, and it's a pleasure to be here. So a very good evening to everybody on the webinar. And I think as it has been explained by Neeraj, I think one thing is very clear, and I think that's what me and Neeraj would want you to go away with, that data-driven culture actually applies for everybody, the whole organization. And here we are talking specifically for HR. Why? Because HR is still sort of catching up on this particular area of analytics and all that stuff. And hence, talking data there now makes more sense, because all the lessons which are learnt by other functions in the organization can be put to use for HR to use as a springboard and take it forward. And hence we thought, me and Neeraj, that we will make this presentation. It's very short and sweet, very simple, so that we can share with our experiences, because me and Neeraj, apart from HR, work in other domains also, and we have just tried to bring all that together out here and how it applies for HR. Neeraj.
Yeah, so I think, Tejpal, I think you would want to ask this question to the audience.
Right. Yeah. So I think time for us to see how many of you are still up with your cup of tea or tea and coffee in your hand. So does any of the screen sounds familiar to you? So we would like you to ping us onto your Q&A thing and tell us that does any of this statement make any sense to you? You know, have you heard it now in the previous organization somewhere else where we say we do analytics but the data is unreliable, or I can't even get this, or I we know exactly what is happening and have data to prove it, but I don't know how to measure and how to measure. So can we, Neeraj, do we have a poll on
Yes,
this?
I was just about, I just launched the poll. Here's a
Okay.
poll that we are having, about 2 questions here, and what I would like you guys to see is that what kind of answers do you want to look at this? Yeah, I think we just wait, Tejpal, for a minute or so. People
Yeah,
are
yeah.
not voting. Guys, are you getting the poll on your screen? I hope. Yeah. Answers coming in. Great. Yeah. So, Tejpal, I think we've got about close to half of the audience already having voted.
Right.
Let's figure out.
Give it few more seconds. Give it few more seconds.
All right.
Yeah, we should go for the second one.
Yeah. Okay. I still see votes coming in, so I'm going to let. All right. So I think this is how it looks like, right?
Right.
I'm going to share it with the audience so that you guys can see how it appears. Right? If you see, this is about majority of them have spoken about uh, you know HR being the focal point of the employee data. Yeah, Tejpa.
Right. Do we have the second question also to play?
It was also in the same poll.
Okay. Well, because I can see only one. Just give me a minute. I think something on my screen. Okay. Right. So I think quite interesting, and I think it's amazing to see that at least HR people think that bulk of the CEO will come and ask them, and I think that's where we put this poll, because our experience, mine and Neeraj, is with the companies we have worked at, that is always not the case, right? And they might, like few people have said, to finance, they might go to, and I think other part is, if you see the breakup of where will the HR head go and ask, I think that's where it lies, and we will talk about that when we go ahead. That you may want to. Some are saying CNB, some are saying recruitment, some are saying HR operation, and the key part here is, you may be right from your organization point of view, but we will talk is, do you have a proper definition of what is data, what is the source, and then the definition, so that no matter which domain or which function, they understand the same thing on the same lines. And I think that's what we are talking about as we go ahead and speak about it. Neeraj.
One instance I'd like to give you guys from one of the companies that we were speaking to, and when we talked about full time, what is the definition of full time in the first place, right? Are you looking at the vendor employees who are working on your roles here? What is it that constitutes a full time? So what we are trying to get here is, when we talk of data, we need to go right from the definitions of data onwards. Are everybody in the organization speaking the same language when we talk about these definitions? When I say a full-time employee, right from the CEO to the finance head to the HR, are everybody on the same page that I'm going to call a full-time employee only within these categories? and then you break it down into the other areas in which your data would happen. Just a very small example of how we felt within the HR department, also the definition of a full-time employee may not necessarily. If it's there in your case, it's great, but that's not always the case. Yeah.
Right. Should we just go ahead, Neeraj, when we close this?
Yeah. So one thing is very clear is that the HR has the potential to become one of the leaders in analytics, right? But is it a reality? Is what we need to look at, right? And this is, I think, Tejpal's favorite question when he asks.
Right. So I think the key part out here is, I think again we have done. I think one thing which most of the experts in the world are able to agree is that HR has the potential to use analytics the most, given the kind of work which is being done and what all can be used. But is that the reality? And I think that those numbers in front of you are speaking about it, even though at a generic term. So I think the question to ask yourself out here is that, if for some case you can't get the headcount from HR, right? Can you get from somewhere else? And I'm sharing with my experience. When I was working before moving into HR, I was working in business. I practically maintained my own headcount. So I could use that. Now the key part is, if that is happening, if people are maintaining their own parallel systems, then it goes back to point out that the source of data, or the reliability, or the confidence on the data is not there. And trust me when I say this, is that the moment people lose trust on data, then no matter what we do on it, we may use AI, we may use machine learning, we may use the best of the tools. If they don't trust the data, they will not use your data. And I think that's where, which is very, very important to keep in your mind. Neeraj.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty critical aspect that Tejpal has got in, which is the level of trust that your data can bring to the leaders in the organization. And when we talk about HR, especially, we need to understand that data flies in from multiple sources. How is it that we are able to harness that particular data in order to make analytical driven decisions, right? So if we are an organization who aspires to become a leader, or to use the data for decision making especially, then how is it that we first view the data is an important question that comes out here. So what we would like to look at here is, and we are not going to uh, go too much into the depth here, but we thought we should at least leave you with a couple of methods that you could perhaps use, a couple of tools that would go ahead in. Let's say you are on a journey of creating a data driven organization, an HR function. What are the kind of steps that you could take? What we thought that you could look at, and this is based on some of the academic research that I've been doing, plus the consulting and the practice sessions that we have with we both of us have trained over 100 executives in analytics across organizations. So we thought of our learnings are sort of captured in this. One learning that we captured was, you need to, as an HR, decompartmentalize the organization. And when we talk of decompartmentalization, what is it that we try to say? If you recollect the first poll that we said, we talked about, if the HR head wants to go to ask for the number of employees, L&D, functions that are there are functions within the HR in order to, which actually play a certain role in the organization. They are sort of divided based on tasks and what they are aspiring to achieve. What we are trying to look at from the purpose of a data perspective, right? Decompartmentalize them. So what we are saying is, yes, you don't separate the functions that you know what, if it is employee headcount, we should give it to recruitment. Or if it is this set of data, I have my own set. So, and all of you would be in organizations, you would have, most work still happens in Excel sheets, right? Even though we have the ERP systems, which we have data that comes in, but we still download. And I still have my nice, great Excel there which I keep on downloading every end of the week. And I start making changes in that. I use my analysis based on that, right? That's exactly what we are saying. Please don't decompartmentalize the HR function based as a data perspective. Right? Keep the data ownership with some of the functions. So don't get us wrong. We're not saying that ownership of data should be across, but we are saying the data should be decompartmentalized for the entire HR department or the HR function or so. So give ownership, but decompartmentalize, right? And that's where you will start getting a better sense of the data that you get. The second here is when you're embarking on your journey, one should prioritize in the sense, what kind of problems are we trying to solve, and therefore what kind of data is critical for us, and what is the form in which we would need that data, right? You need to go down into the level of the data and right over to the source from where it is coming in. So that needs to be prioritized based on what kind of answers are you seeking for different types of problems. So we are saying look at a backward kind of a thought process. And the next is build a top-down analytical capabilities. And perhaps this is the academician in me speaking, and that's why it's not sugar coated. But in most organizations, there is very limited analytical capabilities available at the top of the function, and that perhaps is one of the reasons why the seriousness of managing data, the seriousness of trying to figure out a data-driven strategy is lost out in the whole aspect. So I think as the leader of an organization, and this is something which we speak about when we look at a large across functions, when we speak to CEOs and try to tell them about data-driven strategies, we say what we need to talk to a top-down analytical capability. So essentially, I think this is where you could perhaps focus on. Tejpal, you can.
Right. So I think let me take an example here, because I think you have explained it pretty well. Let me take an example of one thing which I was involved in was that I think one of my last jobs, our management wanted us to ensure that by end of the year the headcount will not exceed X number, no matter what. And I think it was still 4 months for the year to be over, right? And eventually, because if you say headcount of the organization, then it's HR which becomes the leader, right? Because people means HR, and HR has to do it. But when we had a look at the problem statement on hand, we realized that the data for the new business forecast has to come from finance. There was no use for HR to try to get that data themselves. We decided to use that data from HR because that's where it had to come. We didn't say because it's our project, we'll do it ourselves, right? Then we started saying people hiring pipeline has to come from recruitment, right? Resignation, attrition has to come from operations. Full and final settlement date has to come from CNB, right? So what we did was we looked at where is the actual real source of data from where authentic information will come, which nobody would debate. We agreed to work with them, get the data, and then combine the whole data. And then that's why we were able to break up the compartmentalization by what you were saying, Neeraj, and actually work across the board, where then the top management could get a view which nobody could argue, because the data was authentic. Any question asked was being answered. There was a single version of truth, which we will speak earlier. And that's where we were able to prioritize our what we wanted to do. We were able to decompartmentalize. And the last point which you said, yes, we had to train few people. on this concept and how to make it work. Because when every fortnight we went to the top management with our data, which is, you're saying, data driven strategy, everybody knew that we had backup to backup to backup to backup, which basically meant that unless they had a better data, they could not argue. And that's the basic mean of data driven strategy, because you are letting data speak for itself.
Right. So I think if any of the attendees want to take a better look at what we mean by this three-step model, we have done a webinar for the National HRD Network Pune chapter on their YouTube channel. There is the entire recording of the webinar that is available, which will give you a better sense of how you could utilize this more in detail. But so when you get this presentation, you will have the link there with you as well. Yeah. So the question here is that.
Okay, Neeraj?
Yeah.
Neeraj, before you proceed, there is a set of questions from Mr. Dilip. Would you like to hear that now?
Yeah.
I think it should be on your screen. How should an organization start and move on a journey to become data-driven? How does it overcome the senior management's faith on their domain knowledge, creating a roadblock in starting to depend on what data and analytics says rather than what they know based on their domain knowledge and experience?
Yeah.
And data is limited always, and the analytics may not be factoring the analyst not completely understanding of the business.
Yeah.
So it's like a three set of questions.
We should take them one by one. Dilip, I think thanks for those questions. I think one of the first question that you asked about, I'm just trying to figure out. I'm not able to see the Q&A here. Yeah. See, can you see my screen, Tejpal?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, when you talk about how do you start and move on a journey to become data driven, and the second question about how do you overcome the senior management's faith in their domain knowledge, I think how should you start is a function of where is it that you are currently and where do you aspire to be. We've known organizations who have never gone beyond Excel, and not just, I wouldn't say even Excel, looking at pivot tables. If anyone of you is analytics here, and most of them spoke of pivot tables and then moving on. So where are you currently and where do you aspire to be? Perhaps that is the first step towards the journey that you wish to. When we talk about the domain expertise of the management, which creates now that's where we beg to differ here, that as managers, we are expected to understand the problem and provide solutions. We're not required to be experts in the process or in the analytical tools that we speak about. Right? So that's one of them always.
Right. If I may just add on to it. So Dilip, hi. Thank you for some amazing questions. So I think your first question, how do we start? The first question is simply start.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the point was. Have definitions of what data means to you, like full-time equivalent. What does that mean? Would you mean full-time equivalent mean people who are on the organization role, permanent, not on probation, and they are the people who are being paid directly by the company as the monthly payroll will be my full-time equivalent? Simple thing like that. Sit down, look at all the things you do, start defining simple. I'm going to very basic just to amplify the point out here. Get the things right. Decide who owns which data and make them owner of the data. And anybody in the organization wants that data, they should only go to that particular department and not a person. Remember that. It's a function. They should go to that particular function and get the data. Just two examples for that. And then other part. How do we get senior management faith? when do we get faith? When we trust. When do we trust? When the data is reliable? So if we give data, one mistake I have usually seen, we all strive to be Amir Khans and being perfect. If we go to the management and say my data is 90% accurate, they will accept it. The problem is we never say that. Now you look at finance. I hope there are some finance people out here. And I've worked in finance at one point of time. You ask the CFO what is any company's billing accuracy, they will say 50 to 60%. Customers send back the invoice and say they are wrong, and they still make billions. The point is, say we are 90% accurate, and here is our data, and we are working towards making 90 to 92, then 94, and then 95. That's where you get there. Other part, if you take a problem statement of a senior management and try to solve it for them, you will get the trust faster. Is it really helping them in making their business decisions? And second, are you able to give it fast enough? If they ask you for a data and you will say you will take 2 weeks, and they have to go back to the end customer in 3 days, they will then do it themselves. And once they do it themselves, they will not come back to you. So I think that's where the whole thing comes into play. And as said by Neeraj, if you see this particular webinar recording, you will see us talking about all this in more detail there. I hope it answers, Dilip.
Right. Smita, should we go ahead? I don't. So now let's actually get down to how should you do it. We've spoken about why, and we've spoken about what happens and what is required. But how does one actually do this data-driven part? So we think there are about 5 small wins that one must have in order to start working and start getting the organization, the HR function especially, towards a data-driven. Cultural transformation, single version of truth, critical thinking, developing people, adopting technology, and so on. So we should start with cultural transformation. Yeah, Tejpal?
Yeah, and I think Dilip and other participant, I think it should answer a lot of your question on what it takes. So how to start this journey. I think you will get more answers and examples here. So yes, Neeraj, let's continue. Right. So the key part is it's all about people, right? I think that's very important. You have to remember that it's people which drive the organization, and it's your culture which makes a massive difference, right? Strategy, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And I think it's a big saying. You will find it everywhere and all that stuff. Same thing out here. So you have to work hard to make a culture where data is respected and people want to work on data. And we put it simply here, you can't buy it and outsource it. So you can't go to a McKinsey, or you can't even come to us and say, "Ki boss, I want a culture XYZ, and can you within 3 months bring it for me?" No. Changing culture, bringing in culture is a big change management, which you have to focus on, and it takes time. And obviously starts at top. Key part is how many times you are in a meeting and you are showing your slides, and how many times has the top guy asked you saying, "Show me the backup for this," or "Show me how it was arrived at." The moment the top management takes up that time and start asking that question, you will next time see your data 100 times, because you do not want to be caught on something which you are not aware. It makes it data driven, right? Ask yourself a question. You may not answer here. Are you able to send your monthly report 5 days in advance to the management, and then walk into the room and say, "Ask me questions"? We usually show them the report on the same day. What if we are able to send it 5 days before with all the backup? Management sees it and then see what happens. That's where the cultural transformation happens. Co-create. The example I gave out there. If there is a data which requires something to come from finance, something to come from HR, something to come from functions, get that together, work on it together. The moment you share data from the source to everybody, you will find your data quality will go up. Right. And the last one, very important, make smart metrics, make killer metrics aligned with the strategy, because that will drive the behavior for people to get data. And when the data, when that starts happening and they know that the metric will be in their scorecard and the scorecard could eventually impact their performance, you will see people starting to work on data much more diligently. And that's why cultural transformation is very, very important. Right. Then that brings us to the second point, which is a single version of truth. What is a single version of truth is it's always a fight between being consistent and being flexible. Bulk of the time, a phone call from a CXO, we are willing to be so flexible that then we may not be consistent. It's a fight. And I think that's what we need to balance many a point of time and say, okay, I'm okay to be flexible as long as I don't compromise on being consistent. So for an example, I'll give you, if I get my attrition report on Friday evening, 5 o'clock, and somebody wants it on Thursday night, I should be able to send that email and say that data and say valid for Thursday night. The weekly data is coming on Friday, 5 p.m. So if you want to use that, use it, but it is valid a day before. It is not my weekly report. So I think that's where the single version of truth comes. Other part we have spoken, that right functions who have been identified using the right definitions give the data. Second point, very obvious, we have spoken about it, Neeraj. Don't aim to be 100%. In HR specifically, there is nothing like 100%. You blink an eye, one guy has resigned. So you can never be 100%, but be certain. You should be able to say, I am at 91 to 92%. I'm at 93%. And I think that's what really done. And the last one, keep your data safe and secure. People would love to use your data if they know the data is safe, data is not being played around with, everything is following a particular ethics and a particular mechanism. Data is secured and it will always be right. You will figure out that very soon your data would be accepted as a version of truth, even though it may not be 100%.
Yeah.
Back to you, Neeraj.
I think just to add to the 100% with Tejpal, is that I remember one of the executives who was in a senior management presentation with his data, and because he had come to us and we had shown him some methods of doing that, went and said that I can talk with 82 or 83% accuracy that this is the quality of my data. And he came back to us telling us that, you know what, they weren't worried about my 82 or the 83. They started asking me, boss, what happened to the other 16%, 17%? So the focus was on, hey, look, you are certain about this particular data. They wanted to figure out how are you, or what is it that you are doing to that balance data part, or that part which was not certain enough for him. And so he went back and he tried to figure out that when I said 85%, what were the other 15% that we were not talking about? And he had to go back, and when he was talking about his presentation again, he had to figure in that look, this is the 85% that I'm damn sure my data is capturing, but this is the 15, and this 15 looks in this manner. So when you're talking about inconsistency, I think it's important for us to highlight those inconsistencies as well.
Yes.
As we as we stress on our consistency. That's another point. Yeah, and moving on, I think one of the other aspects of building the data-driven organization is something as critical thinking. You need to empower people, and we've seen in our multiple training programs. We get HR folks who have come and they go back after the training program very motivated, very enthusiastic. That boss, I'm going to go back to I'm a recruiter. I'm going to go back and use these learnings and try. And then when we get back to them after a couple of months that, hey guys, you want some help, you need some hand holding, they say, sir, kuch kar nahi sake because, you know what, I don't have permissions enough to do it, or my organization has this issue and this issue, and so on and so forth. We need to build that empowerment process there. We say, hey, look, you got a great idea. You're going to look at this set of data. All right, work on a project, come back, let's discuss, let's see how we take it further. And I think I come, mostly my training is from the operations area, uh, where we have something called as a Deming's wheel, which is talking about the plan, do, study, and the act cycle. And I think one of the major ways which will encourage within your organization is if this cycle is followed. For every problem that you have, if you start using this method and then moving up, that will give you a good sort of understanding on how you can build critical thinking within the organization. We already touched on this a bit about developing people, but I want to highlight three specific. Hire the right people. Right people, we don't mean in terms of skills. They have R programming. This guy knows, he's an engineer. He's good with numbers, statistics, so on and so forth. We are saying people with the right attitude. People with an attitude to learn about data. How do you look at data and draw parallels from different categories of data or types of data? Give the right training. I think this is very, very critical and very, very important. Training. We'll talk about that when we look at go towards the end. But training in terms of where you are in the maturity model of the analytical journey that your organization is looking out for. The training needs to be there, and more important, get the right trainers. Right. I think this is where, because today, if you look at the analytics domain, and especially if you're looking at HR, there are a host of training programs, a host of very good ones which are there. But you know what? They may be great, but are they right? And when I say right, I'm not focusing on the skill sets of the trainer, but I'm saying, are they right in terms of what your organization needs? So I think this is something that you must start looking at when you develop people. We will also be looking at adopting technology. You don't. We've seen organizations too hung up on tools and databases and technologies, and we have a different point of view, the both of us. You start with what you have. You have Excel, great. Let's start with that. Right? And then as you mature, you go for the advanced tools. That focus on capabilities is more critical than focusing on the tool, or focusing on the database, or focusing on the technology per se. I think that shift needs to be there. If you have a focus on the capability, we don't see tools or technologies becoming hindrances in the process of your analytical or data-driven journey. Tejpal, would you want to add?
No, I think in the interest of time, let's go to the other part, because it speaks on the same thing, and then we can open up for questions. Right. So I think just to bring it up together, I think where I think we have spoken about. So I think again answers the question. You have to look at your culture. You have to transform your culture. You have to figure out the single version of truth where the data comes. Encourage critical thinking. Allow people to experiment with data, because data, when allowed to be looked into different angle, comes up with different options. Develop people. Rightly as said by Neeraj, that very, very important, that the attitude, that data driven thinking, very, very important, links with culture. And it could also drive your new hiring when you are doing. You may want to include that as per one of the parameters to see, do they value data or not. Last one, adopt technology. Very rightly said by Neeraj that we feel, both of us, we are into it big time, that tools are enablers, they are not solutions. And if you look at what we have put up out here, again, lot of research which we have read. I think it is very clear that 62.5% composition, if you want to make your organization data driven, is people, depends on people. 30% on processes, on only 7.5% on technology, right? So just because you have SAP doesn't really mean that I will say ERP. I will rephrase myself. I'll make myself vendor neutral. If you have ERP, that does not guarantee you data quality. Garbage in, garbage out, right? So and I think one more question out here. I hope you guys know that the ERP implementation successful rate across the globe is only 5%. So if a company ends up using ERP 5%, they celebrate. And I've been there myself. I can tell you that, right? So again, focusing on people, getting the right people with the right mindset, and doing it, backing them with the right process. And if this too is done, get in the technology, and then you can really build a data driven function. Neeraj.
Right. No, I'm completely with you on that. And uh, I, uh, perhaps that's the training that my background offers me, is looking at the process and then trying to look at the people, and how the overarching uh, kind of strategy that you must look at are between these two. Because once you have a process in place, is when technology will not follow in unless and until there is a certain process. But that's ultimately what tech works on, is a process. So I think these were some of our thoughts, guys, on what we think we could look at when we are looking at data-driven functions. I guess as closing remarks, this is something that's favorite of ours. In God we trust, and all others must bring data. Again, the grand old guru of quality, Edwards Deming, has told that unless you get data, and what we like to put in our very humble two bits here is that the right kind of data. And by right, we would mean what kind of data is uh, required, what kind of data is necessary for the function at that point of time. I think that's what we like to focus on. Tejpal, any closing thoughts you might have?
And now I will say, bring it on. We'll take the questions now, and then we'll close.
Thank you, Smita. Over to you.
Yes. So I will take some questions. One is from Ms. Japji Kaur. So she has asked if you can share insights on how education sector can benefit with the HR data analytics.
Sorry, my voice got lost in between. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah. So there is a question about what are the insights on how education sector can benefit with the HR data analytics?
Well, I think quite a bit. Tejpal, I'm sorry, but I'll take this up.
Yeah, please.
Sector. So I'm not going to go into courses and all of that, what we could offer, but as an education sector, this gives us tremendous opportunity within the university or institution or so. I'm assuming that we are speaking from that level and not the level of courses and so on. Because perhaps, to my mind, universities are the last ones to actually harness and use the data, despite having lots of data, lots of knowledge at their disposal. Unstructured, most data in ways scattered all across the place. I think that's where education institutions, if you're looking at experiences of students, for example, right? A lot of data keeps on moving around the universities, colleges, coaching classes, and all of that. But are we making use of that? So I think, yes, education sector, a lot of it really could make sense.
If I may add, Neeraj, while you are the right guy to answer that, I think my reply to this to be follow up with the question, and I believe she is from education. So if you are if you are in a meeting and I ask how many students have taken which subjects and what is their attendance, how much time will it take you to get that information? And if you say I have to revert back to you, then I think you need to look at, do you have a data driven culture where you are able to slice dice the data the way you are looking for? Or the other thing which we used to talk about when I was working in Thamax, if there is a fire and people evacuate, can you from your punch in punch out figure out how many people were in the campus and how many people are standing after the fire evacuation? Can you tally that? I think you can think about it, ma'am, who's asked the question. And if you still don't get the answer, ping me or Neeraj separately, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you about it.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Harish Narayan. He's asking, how do we identify relevant data? So how do we separate relevant from irrelevant data?
Neeraj, can I take? Right. Smita, what was his name?
Mr. Harish Narayan.
Yeah, Harish Narayan, good evening. I'm going to take a liberty of just being slightly naughty out here. So let's say in this particular webinar, while you are listening to us, you also took out time to do some WhatsApp and answer 1 or 2 emails. The relevant was listening to us, and doing the remaining 2 part was irrelevant. So any data, any information which is not helping you to solve your problem statement becomes irrelevant. And that's where we spoke about in our 5-step was define smart metrics. So any data which is not supporting your metrics, or is not going to help you for any decision making, as said by Neeraj, now or in the future, you should be asking yourself a question: why are you collecting that data?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go to the next question by Sanjeev. He is asking how the need to develop people is tied to creating a data-driven organization.
So I think I just typed in a response to Sanjeev there. I wasn't sure whether.
Okay.
So when you're trying to develop people, I mean, if you're trying to build an organization, whether it's a data-driven organization you want to do, or it's a ethical, culture-driven organization, unless and until the development starts from people, the ultimate goal of the object of the organization cannot be achieved, right? People don't necessarily come with an understanding of data. People don't necessarily come with an appreciation of why should there be data in the first place, right? I mean, we've got very senior people whom we've spoken to who say that, look, 35 years in this profession, I can look at the candidate who walks in and tell him whether I'm selecting him or not. Facial recognition, data. So unless you develop, doesn't work.
Right. Smita, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, there is one participant, Sunil More, who has been raising his hand for last 20 minutes. Is there a way to ask what he wants to know?
Sorry?
I'm saying I can see a raised hand from one participant, Sunil More.
Sunil, if you can, type your question in the chat, we would be able to answer this.
Right.
Okay. In the meanwhile, I think we can take another question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, Smita.
You want to?
Yeah. So there was one interesting question. How do you measure HR? And what are the latest metrics which are used in HR area?
Tejpal?
Right. Okay. How do you measure HR? So the question out here is, how do you measure HR or HR performance or HR performance? I think both of them are different, and I think my answer, a brief answer here, because it's a very huge topic, would be just ensure that your HR metrics are aligned with your organizational vision, goal, and strategy. And any HR metric which does not help business to succeed, you should ask yourself, why do you have it in your scorecard? So all the objectives, whatever you have in HR, directly or indirectly, should be helping the business to succeed. So your attrition, if you're trying to bring down your attrition, the objective here should be that there should be business continuity. The knowledge for the business should not get reduced. Neeraj, you're going to say something.
Well, I wanted you to stress on, the project that was done in Delhi, where we looked at, matching the matrix, capturing with the balance scorecard.
Oh yeah, yes. So I think the key part, usually what happens is, there are multiple aspects in one of the consulting projects which we did out there. The key part was, you had to, the whole picture was not there. It was only looking at internal processes, the focus on the customer CSAT, or the focus on the support from the technology was not there, and hence the whole process was not working. Everybody was working hard, everybody was doing their best, but in the end the customer was not happy. And when we sat down with them, look at their problem statement, look at all what was required, and then we helped them put together a simple metrics, suddenly things started working. So frankly, me and Neeraj did nothing great. We just asked questions and we just said what is required, why, where, and all. And when you put them together, and they are the only people who worked there, and it worked. Neeraj.
Yeah, no, I think that example perhaps would give.
Yeah.
Okay, there is another question from Dilip. Have you ever demonstrated to HR or CEOs as to how much value in money terms or efficiency terms does being data-driven create?
So, multiple times the realization comes in after a couple of projects get completed. Till then, there is always that thought process that, why should I be doing this thing that I've been doing? So yes, there is a resistance, there is a thought process, but the realization that this does bring, in terms of numbers, in terms of percentage, which Dilip is talking about, it comes in a little later. And yes, we've been able to do that. Fairly decent transformations that we've had, especially when we try to look at process efficiencies, thanks to the data, back and forth of data coming and going. Tejpal, you want to add something?
No, I think you have summarized. I can just say that, yeah, we can take one example where no shows, where people accept offer but they don't join. And then if you look at the data and say it usually takes you 2 months to find a new person, you put a business cost to it, how much are you losing. It's called as opportunity lost cost. And then if by using data and obviously using analytics, if you can make a model where you can predict who will join and who will not join, and bring down your no-show level, working with the business, you can sit with your CXO and say, we've brought down our no-shows from 9% to 3%. And by the way, that means so many lakh of rupees.
I think in one of the training programs that we had, and I'm taking the liberty of moving ahead of the stipulated time. So guys, thanks for bearing with us. We had a large team of HR guys coming in from a pharma company. And when we asked this typical question about, can you tell us the headcount at this point of time, is when we realized that they were getting different answers. And perhaps that realization, thankfully, the head HR was also present there. That we didn't need to show him the efficiency. I'm sure he understood what numbers it meant, what it meant that each department was talking. So I guess, yeah, that would be it. I think we've lost.
Okay, there is one question. There is one question which will answer, I think, some of the other questions also, and I think it is a very relevant and very practical question.
Sure.
That Most of the it is from Dilip. No, sir. He's it is from Prem Kumar Parmeshwar.
Yeah.
So he is asking that making a transition from old technology to new technology in HR analytics is always a problem, because the HR department is more comfortable using Excel sheet, and when the top management tries to push them to using SAP, Oracle or PeopleSoft, there is always a resistance. So have you come across something like that, and how it can be solved?
So what we normally, there are two ways, Prem Kumar, I'm going to answer this question. One way is focusing on the technological bit that you said, and the second focus I'm going to give you is on the mindset that we are talking about, where we are saying that the HR department is still comfortable using Excel, whereas the management is looking. So there is a shift in mindset. Now, where we come from, we think that the tool is not critical in terms of uh, what analytics you want to make, right? What is important is how we have got there. And in that sense, if you're looking at new technology which the management is trying to look at, now I'm talking from the technological perspective, I think HR should look around. We've asked HR to go and take a look at how is it, get yourself as to put in up your game, because that's something that will be required as we move. Today we are talking about basic levels of analytics. Within 5-7 years, you'll be looking at facial recognition, facial technology. We'll be looking at AI, ML based analytics coming into the HR function. How are you going to talk about that? So as an HR, I would urge you to look at from a mindset perspective. But I'm also saying again where you are in that journey of data and analytics, right? So if you are still, you have the whole department working with different kinds of Excel spreadsheets where everybody has a different spreadsheet for everything, perhaps you need to start rethinking. Yeah.
Thank you. There is a question from Devashish Ghosh. What are some of the tools that can be used or are useful for HR analytics?
Ishwal, I'll take that, or you want to? So
I can't even hear, so I think you go for it.
Devashish, look at it this way: HR analytics is no different from any other kind of analytics that you want to look at, right? Tools available are essentially around how you figure out a solution for a problem. So, what tools? For example, if you are looking at high levels of data handling, if you are looking at low levels of data handling, if you are looking at uh, real-time data handling, your tool needs to be different based on that level that you are trying to lay. So you could start with an Excel. You could be having an Excel may also be okay if you are looking at that aspect. You might actually need an IBM Watson if you are looking at an AI-based tool, right? In one of these seminars that we were there was a facial recognition of whether the interviewee is really going to be helpful in our organization or not. So we would again go back to what we are trying to say is that the tool is, please look at the tool as an enabler. Let's really focus on what we want the tool to do.
To add there, Neeraj.
Yeah.
Smita, can I add one point there? Yeah. And I think when we talk about tool, when we talk about tool, I think somehow it's amazing that tool becomes linked with technology. A tool also would be how will you identify what is your need, and then look at what tool, what technology you have with that. Is that solving your problem or not? Right? What like it was being said by Neeraj, you can use IBM Watson, which is amazing, by the way, to do lots of predictive analytics, but you also have two people in your organization who can do nice programming in Python and can do predictive outlet on machine learning to you. The question out here is, somebody asked me, how can you show business value to your CHRO or CXO? So if you use an expensive tool, your ROI becomes delayed. If that can be done by a simple tool, your ROI would be more and you will be able to show the benefit which you have made for the organization. And that's why be wise in what you choose and how you use it.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. There is another question from Vipul. It's a long question. I will read it out. I was working with a consultancy firm. So the consultancy head was just focused on data. He was not concerned more whether the employees were happy or not. He just gave targets which were like 120 calls a day. So if you have 120 calls a day, you are present, and 100 calls, then you are absent. So is this right? Also, the targets were calls and input based and not selections based. So is this right?
I think let me first focus on the, you know, perhaps my sense here is that what we are talking about here is if you are wanting to, why are you saying 100 calls and why not 90 calls and why not 70 and why not 140, right? To be present. So the question we are trying to address here is not about whether he gave targets or he did not give targets. The question we are trying to figure out is that number correct or not? How is that data coming from? I think the whole premise of this talk is based on the fact that how do you look at data? So when you're talking about this, perhaps, you could have made a presentation to him saying that there are 15 people in the organization and this is how the call rates have been and the success rates have been. Perhaps that's how you could have taken this up.
Okay, thanks, Neeraj. Now, there is a short question, but I think it's a difficult question to answer from Rajendra. Is the role of HR of a silent observer?
I'm going to answer that question in a different manner. Has the role of an HR ever been of a silent observer? I don't think so. I think if we look at the history of HR, and this is not really anything to do with data or to do with anything, it's more talking about the function itself, right? The role of an HR has always been critical to the organization in different forms. So they may not have been called HR people. When you were in the industrial ages, you had somebody who was called as an IR manager, or he was called as a factory worker in charge, or something of that sort. The nomenclature was not critical. What was the role? What's the role of an HR today? When you look at the head of an HR of when he's handling 20,000 employees across. So I'm saying the role of the HR, in my opinion, and that's again, I would not even want Tejpal to agree on that. In my opinion, the HR has never been a bystander unless they have chosen to be one.
Yeah, right. I think I will say, because we're talking data, I say I have no data point which tells me that HR has been a silent observer. So, and I am a data guy, so I don't talk without data. But on the other side, you are silent either when you are wise or when you don't have anything to talk about. If you don't have anything to talk about and you are quiet, then as an HR, you need to think about it. And if you are wise and being quiet, which means that you are just waiting for your time to make the right point. You need to ask yourself, which one are you?
Thank you. There is a question from Shloka. I need to know how much you can rely on survey forms data and how can we make it more reliable?
Okay. Yeah. So survey form, again, the key part which we have spoken about again, is it consistent? Are you following ethics? If the right ethics and the right approach is being followed, and then the inputs come in, then I think it does make sense. If she's referring to a employee engagement survey where people give a feedback, then yes. I think it can be reliable to the extent. And again, I think there are lots of models where you can look at the biases from the inputs coming and then filter them out. But again, when you are doing this from a known source, it may be reliable. But if you're doing it with people you don't know, then you have to factor in that pinch of salt about saying that will there be biases on how it is being done. So how you design your survey also really matters, Smita.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. I think we will have to end the webinar because we have already exceeded the time limit. Thank you, Mr. Batra, and thank you, Professor Mankad, for a very insightful session on building a data-driven HR function. I think the key thing which we all need to remember from this session, we should definitely remember, is that data can be used for multiple purposes, but the idea should be to get it right at the beginning. So reliable data, relevant data, accurate data is very important. So I think we should all know that. And then, of course, there is a lot we can do with the data, but we should be right when we are starting with the data.
Right.
Professor Mankad and Professor Batra, thank you for giving your time for this session. I will just explain what we are going to have for the next masterclass. Our next masterclass, which is our 7th masterclass, is by Professor Nitin Sanghavi, who is a professor in Manchester Business School, and he's a distinguished visiting faculty at Flame University also. The topic which he'll be taking up is new normal in retailing. It is still all about shopping stupid. So I think it should be a very interesting session. Hope we'll see some of you in the next webinar also. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Smita.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Smita. Thank you, Neeraj. Thank you, guys.
And thank you, all of you, for a patient listening.